right, so we've done all this work and it's time to get this property closed. We've made all the effort, we've done all the work, time to get paid. So we're gonna get through this pretty straightforward, not a very difficult class, but I need to go ahead and make sure that you understand what we're doing next. So we need to review the final title commitment. Up front, when we place the title order, we're gonna get that initial title commitment in. We're gonna review that. Before we close, we need to review it yet again to make sure that all exceptions to title have been removed and that we're in good position. So I wanna review Schedule A. Schedule A will include things like who the lender is, what type of policy, who the buyer is, who the sellers are. All of that data needs to be you need to make sure you review it and that it is correct, because I have seen big issues pop up on that. Make sure all addresses are right, all buyers, sellers, entities, states of entities, and everything in between is correct in Schedule A. Schedule B, you need to make sure that if there's any exceptions to title in there that you wanted removed, you got them removed. And Schedule C, any encumbrances, any liens that you've worked towards, unless you plan on purchasing that property subject to those liens or encumbrances, then you need to have them removed. All things that could cause you some hiccups prior to closing. So if you're not familiar with that process, your title company should be able to help you out, or your title attorney should be able to review that for you. Also, before closing, we're going to want to review the preliminary HUD and make sure that who's paying what is correct, how much is being paid is correct, and that all things are accounted for. I want to press the title company to get this done well in advance of closing, so that way all parties involved have time to review and make any corrections needed. Out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of HUDs that I have seen, it is rare, very rare, that I see a HUD where it's like no problems whatsoever, let's move forward with closing. So if you get a HUD the morning of closing, you might be in trouble. So always push to get that done beforehand. If you're not familiar with HUDs, closing disclosures, HUD ones, go back, review that here in the Academy. We have classes specifically on HUDs, on CDs, and on the closing procedures. So go through, check those out. But the things that I'm specifically looking for is that these are correct, is the purchase price, taxes, agent's commissions, assignment fees, items paid outside of closing, such as seller paid directly to seller prior to. I need to make sure that it's all documented correctly so that way everybody gets paid what they're supposed to get paid. Earnest money deposits, non-refundable deposits for wholesales, option fees, recording fees, escrow fees. Are those on the buyer's side of the HUD? Are they on the seller's side of the HUD? Are they correctly documented? Go through review, because I have almost never found a HUD that did not have an error on it. This is important to you because this is how you get paid. Okay, so now I've reviewed the preliminary title commitment for accuracy. I've gone through the HUD to make sure that there's anything that's going wrong corrected. Once I've gone through that, I need to schedule all parties involved so I can get to the final hurdle and get paid. I'm going to go ahead and work with the buyer's lender throughout this entire transaction, whether that be my lender directly or an in-buyer's lender if I'm happening to wholesale this. If you don't understand wholesaling, make sure you check that out in the Academy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to verify with the lender that they've received all paperwork required to close on this property and that they're prepared to fund. If I've got the okay from them, I'm then going to reach out to the seller, and with that seller, what I'm going to do is make sure that all parties involved in chain of title come to the title company. They don't all have to be there at the same time. You may have some disgruntled family that doesn't want to see each other. Schedule them all separately. Schedule one earlier in the day, schedule the other one a little later in the day so they don't have to see each other if you have that problem. But all people in title do have to sign. They need to bring photo ID. Your title company may require some additional things, but find out from them what's going on and get your schedules set up to sign first. I always like to have my sellers sign first. I don't want to get into all of that right now, but I always have my sellers sign first. I may need to coordinate with remote notaries. Quite often, Dallas-Fort Worth is the backyard that I invest in. We have a very large Metroplex area. It might take close to 2 hours to get from one end of the Metroplex to the other. Sellers might not want to make that drive. Buyers might not want to make that drive. So notifying your title company well in advance if you have a seller or a buyer that you know needs to close remotely. Get the title company coordinated so that way we can schedule the remote notaries to handle this transaction for us. we're going to need to schedule any potential buyers. That might be myself if I'm the one purchasing it. If I'm wholesaling it, then I will need to make sure that I get my end buyer in. Once I have them in, something else that I might need to talk about on that is your end buyer, if they are an LLC, needs to have all of their LLC docs submitted to the title company ASAP. This should have all been ironed out long before today, but things I'm dropping in there. We have a much more detailed class on the escrow and closing process. So if you're a little confused on closing, this is kind of a general overview to round out this specific course. But if you want to learn more about the closing and escrow process, check out that class here in the Academy. So after I have gone through and reviewed my title commitment, confirmed that my HUD was accurate, and I'm ready to move forward with this transaction, I'm going to go ahead and schedule my seller first. I don't want to get into the reasons why, but I always like to have my seller signed off on first. They're going to need to bring in their driver's license. They're going to need some form of photo ID. If I have multiple sellers, all of them have to sign. Not just one of them, all of them. If they are in, bad terms with each other, I can schedule them separately, but they all have to sign. After my sellers have been scheduled, I schedule my buyer for afterwards. I need to make sure that the buyer is prepared. I need to confirm that the lender is prepared to fund, that all have received all documents. These are things that I should be confirming as I'm getting closer to the closing date. This shouldn't be a surprise on the final day. I should make sure that the buyer's lender, whether that be myself or a wholesale's end buyer's lender, need to make sure that they're moving forward and getting this thing going. But once all that has been done, I need to make sure that the buyer brings in either a cashier's check or wires their funds. If they end up bringing in a cashier's check, it could delay closing up to 2 or 3 days based upon, depending on the title company and what their policies are. I prefer to bring in wires. There has been a lot of wire fraud going on lately. That's been happening. So if there is wiring occurring, make sure the title company communicates directly with the lender, buyer, whoever that is, and you stay out of the middle of it, because you would hate to be caught up in the middle of something like that. So make sure that all the communications about wires is handled directly through the title company. You may need remote notaries to get this facilitated. Your DFW marketplace is like close to 2 hours from one end to the other, depending upon what time of the day it is. It could be even longer than that. Those things taken into consideration, your buyers and sellers may not feel like making that kind of drive. If you can schedule remote notaries for them, so that way it makes their transaction a little easier, it'll get you over the hurdle a little faster. One thing that I personally like to do with every property I close is work with not only the sellers, but potentially my end buyers if I'm wholesaling, and I get testimonials from them at the title company. I don't wait a week. I don't wait, till the next day. I don't send them an email. While they're with title, I get a testimonial filled out. It's pre-done. It's kind of like 4 or 5 questions. How did Daniel help me? What did I like? What did I not like? What could I have done to make this process easier? I get those testimonials at title because it guarantees that I get them almost 100% of the time. And I use those testimonials in future marketing and future appointments to show sellers what other people have said about working with me. I'm going to make sure that the wire is sent and all lien holders are clear. I've got the buyer to sign off. I got the seller to sign off. We've got the escrow, funds in escrow. Everything's looking good, but it's not over. You need to make sure that the wires are sent. The lenders have confirmed receipt, that all lien holders have been paid off. And until I've received that, the day is not over with, because what happens if title forgot to send out a wire? That's happened, it has happened, it has happened, it has happened, and your property's going to auction the next day. Well, if I call up the lender before the end of the day and I'm like, hey, we've closed on this property, have you received your wire? Then the lender's like, no. I call the title company back. Hey, title company, have you sent out this wire? No, we haven't sent it yet. We have this problem. You need to stay on top of this level of communication, because until you know for a fact all lien holders have been paid off, your job's not done. But once you have confirmed it, it's time to start work. Whether that means you're a landlord, a rehabber, an owner financer, or a wholesaler, that is when you are finally able and clear to close. And I hope you've enjoyed this class here in the Propelio Academy on foreclosures. This is my first run on it, so as I get more feedback from you, I'll see areas where I can come in and try and clean it up some. So please do give me some feedback below. On this particular course right here, on this one with the closing process, we do have a full and total closing process video here in the Academy that'll get into more detail. And I've got one more class for you on advanced possibilities, which is where a lot of the really creative nuggets start jumping in. So check out that class next, and I appreciate you for tuning in.